Buongiorno. We're gonna rip this game. I managed to grind out all the secret spots and shit, so now we're just focusing on grinding levels out. I think I'm missing one disc from like the jungle. That's it. We're gonna watch Neutrality Studies. That's the name of this channel. This guy's. I haven't read up on mass formation since I was in like fucking high school. And yeah, I was hard up on. When I was in high school, I really liked my sociology, psychology, anthropology, all that good shit. Um, yeah, so this guy is an expert in mass formation. So yeah, I haven't heard about mass formation in a long time, but that's not a good sign. That's not a good thing you want to be hearing. And he actually touches on the 2021 the COVID situation because yes, that was a kind of a form of mass formation, almost like hysteria. Kind of talks about how these events are brought on by like a communal miasma. Like it's these things are linked to like depression and like the personalities that come out during these times kind of explain why there's usually mass oppression and death because there's some type of I don't know. We'll see. I only watched like the first 10 seconds, so very interesting. Let's play this and play this. Let's get smart in the morning. I'm more smarter.
Welcome back, everybody, to Neutrality Studies. I'm Pascalota, and I'm joined today by
Become
Dr.
intelligent.
Matthias Desmet, a professor of clinical psychology at Ghent University in Belgium, a practicing psychotherapist, and one of the world's leading scholars on the theory of mass formation, as well as the author of the wonderful book, The Psychology of Totalitarianism. Matthias, welcome.
Thank you for having me, Pascal.
It's great having you. You are one of the voices that was very, very important during the COVID-19 mass formation. You were the person who championed that kind of interpretation, and you wrote this very important book of trying to make sense psychologically of some of the tendencies that we've been seeing going on in society. Can we maybe talk a little bit about this? Can we start with the concept of mass formation and how it links up with totalitarianism?
Yes. That's a good point to start.
He didn't. Yes.
Well,
I didn't realize
I started doing a PhD at Ghent University in Belgium back in 2003, and
the peasants are foaming. No, I'm just kidding.
I was supposed to do a classical research in psychology, where I would investigate the associations between certain personality traits and depressive symptoms. It might seem like a strange point to start going into the topic of totalitarianism, but you will see it is related. So I started to do my classical research in psychology, and like after a few months, I had a feeling that like these research methods that I was supposed to use, like where I would measure the psychological characteristics and then compute statistical correlations between them, that these research methods actually impossibly could lead to valid results. And because when I measured the same psychological characteristic, for instance a personality trait, in 3 different ways, the results were often completely different. And I asked my promoter of my PhD whether, rather than doing this classical research in psychology, whether I could just investigate the validity of research methods in psychology. And I was granted permission to do so. And then, like, when I was investigating these research methods in psychology, like after 2 years, the replication crisis started in the sciences, which actually showed that like the vast majority of published research papers are false. And there was this famous paper, of course, by John Ioannidis, which was titled "Why Most Published Research Findings Are False." So this problem I stumbled upon in psychology turned out to be quite widespread in the sciences. Like more than 85% of the papers cannot be reproduced, which means that they actually have no scientific validity at all. And the strange thing was, like, on the basis of the results of my PhD, I published my first book, a very small book. I don't have a copy with me here now, but it's a very small book, which was titled "The Pursuit of Objectivity in Psychology," and I made it clear, I think in a very clear way, in such a way that, well, like even a child maybe could understand when it sees certain examples that the research method in psychology cannot possibly lead to valid conclusions. And the strange thing was at that moment that every time when I gave a presentation or a lecture about this phenomenon, where I really presented the audience with these very simple examples showing that for instance, the measurement methods in psychology are not reliable and are not valid, and that they contain too much measurement error to do meaningful statistical inference. And like every time I presented this, I could see the same thing. Like a few people in the audience, like maybe a few percent, like 2-3% of the people, were very enthusiastic and they wanted to know more. But like more than 90%, or at least many of them, got angry. And when I asked them like, okay, but tell me, why would I be wrong? Can you show? You know, I have a master's, I have a PhD in psychology, but also a master's degree in statistics. I'm a statistician as well. And every time I ask them, like, show me, where is my statistical mistake? Where is the mathematical mistake in my line of reasoning? Like, nobody ever gave me an answer because I think it was clear that from a mathematical point of view, I was right. And at that moment, I just started to become fascinated by something very strange, like that under certain conditions, very intelligent people, because like my colleagues at university are very intelligent people, they are highly intelligent people, but under certain conditions, highly intelligent people can buy into a narrative that is actually absurd, and no matter what you do, they will refuse to drop the narrative. They will continue by it. So, and like somewhere, I think it was around 2013 or something.
It's not so hard to read a paper and get a leg up.
I started to go into mass psychology because I started to become aware of the fact that this strange expert blindness, as I sometimes call it, this strange expert blindness, this strange blindness of people under certain conditions, like cannot be explained on the basis of individual psychology alone. You need to understand how people, and people like them, people cognitive thinking, is in the grip of psychological processes at the level of the group to which they belong. That's where I got interested, and after a few years maybe, I started to become aware that. So I started to read about mass psychology, and after a while, after a few years, I started to become aware of the fact that actually this phenomenon, for which I coined the term mass formation, the term was used by Gustave Le Bon as well, sometimes. Sigmund Freud as well, I think, used it a few times. But then I use it as the major term to indicate a strange phenomenon of group formation, which has this very strange effect at the level of individual psychological functioning. So, like mass formation, when people are in the grip of a mass formation, they will typically
Yeah, that's pretty good.
Be incapable of taking a critical distance of everything the group believes. When the group believes in the most absurd things, people will buy into it, no matter how intelligent they are. They will become willing to radically self-sacrifice. That's another very strange characteristic of mass formation. People in the grip of a mass formation are willing to radically self-sacrifice, and then the most dangerous thing, of course, is that they will typically become radically intolerant for dissonant voices, for everyone who thinks differently. And like this strange phenomenon, I started to become aware of the fact that actually this phenomenon of mass formation is the basis of totalitarianism. Like it's the phenomenon of mass formation is what makes totalitarian states such as Nazi Germany or Soviet Union, which are famous examples. This phenomenon of mass formation is what makes totalitarian states completely different from classical dictatorships. And most people mix up the two. Most people think like that Nazi Germany was a dictatorship. Not at all. And or that the Soviet Union was a classical dictatorship. That's not true at all. It's completely different. And the difference is that in a totalitarian state, that's psychological is based on mass formation. And a classical dictatorship isn't.
Hey, very brief intermission because I was recently banned from YouTube, and although I'm back, again. So please consider subscribing not only here, but to my mailing list on Substack. That's pascalota.substack.com. The link's going to be in the description below. And now, back to the video. So you're viewing then the totalitarian state as something that goes psychologically much deeper than just the power structures, right? That the political power structures that are built. They essentially include this fanatic belief by a large number of the group into the core tenets of the group. That's about it, right? And it's not just that the guy on the top has all the weapons and then is able to force everybody into submission.
No, exactly. That would be a classical dictatorship. Like in a classical dictatorship, there is this dictatorial regime, which indeed, as you said, like has all the weapons, and people are scared of the aggressive potential of the regime, and so they just accept that the dictatorial regime unilaterally imposes its social contract. That's a classical dictatorship. But a totalitarian is something much more powerful.
Now we do it.
In a totalitarian state,
Yeah, can we just do the objectives?
Usually in the population. That means that the part of the population starts to believe fanatically in a certain ideology. For instance, the race theory, which were popular before the rise of Hitler in Nazi Germany, or historical materialism, Marxism, which became very popular in the Soviet in Russia by the end of the 90s. So first, in a beginning of a totalitarian state is a psychological process where a certain part of the population, usually not much more than 20 to 30%, so it's not everyone, definitely
what are we doing
not.
anyway? I'm so confused.
So like 20 to 30% of the population starts to believe fanatically in a certain ideology, and because of the emotional function this ideology has in this part of the population, a mass formation will emerge, where people so fanatically believe in the ideology that they are incapable of seeing everything in reality which is in contrast or in conflict with that ideology, and where they start to believe so fanatically in it that they are willing to sacrifice their lives for it, and where they start to feel very aggressive against everyone who doesn't buy into the ideology. So that's what's happening in a totalitarian state, and once this process of mass formation emerges in society, there is a chance that there are certain rhetorically gifted people who use it to seize control of the state apparatus. So they present themselves as Hitler did, as Lenin did. They present themselves as those who incarnate like all the virtues of this ideology, and they use the masses to seize control. And then
Nice.
like a state system emerges, which, as Hannah Arendt very eloquently said in her Origins of Totalitarianism, she said like a state system emerges in that phase, which has a huge secret police, namely this part of the population which blindly and fanatically buys into the state ideology, and who are willing to report everyone to the state who doesn't buy fanatically into this ideology. So that's what happens. Like 20 to 30% of the people buy fanatically believes in the ideology, and they are willing to report their fathers, their mothers, their children, everyone to the state who doesn't follow the narrative. So that means that almost in every sleeping room, in every kitchen, every house, there is someone who actually will report everyone of their family members to the state if they are not loyal enough to the state narrative. That's what happened in Iran, for instance, in the 1978 revolution, for instance. I know a woman who lived there, and she witnessed. She was the daughter of a mayor of one of the major cities of Iran, and
We're going up over here.
she witnessed how a mother who reported her son to the state put the news about when he was on the scaffold, and when he was dead, she was very proud to accept a medal for heroinship. So that was back in 1978. But there's so many examples, like in every process of mass formation. People after a while, very strange, like in Eastern Europe after the Second World War, 20 to 30% of the people belong to the secret police. Literally, they joined the secret police, and then when after the collapse of Eastern Germany, when people went to the archives and tried to find out who reported them to the state, almost everyone was reported by a family member. So that's what happened. And that's what makes the totalitarian state so extremely suffocating and powerful at a psychological level. And that's why it is so extremely important to understand what happens at a psychological level in a mass movement. Yeah, and I'll add one more thing. You know, from the moment I started to investigate the phenomenon of totalitarianism, I had two questions, like what makes it different from a classical dictatorship? And the second question was like, why did totalitarianism emerge for the first time in the 20th century? Because before the 20th century, there were no totalitarian states. And the answer to both questions, after a while I found out, was just that the phenomenon of mass formation. Like, it's mass formation which makes totalitarianism different from classical dictatorship. And the reason why totalitarian states emerged for the first time in the 20th century is that the phenomenon of mass formation, for certain reasons, which I go into in my book, for certain reasons, the phenomenon of mass formation has always existed. But it became stronger throughout the last centuries. It became stronger and stronger and stronger, just as a consequence of another process, namely the fact that society is atomizing. It's falling apart. More and more people feel lonely, isolated. And that's why mass formations become stronger. As men, we see it now, like for instance, the way in which what happens at the geopolitical level now, like so many people just buy into all these narratives which are used now to go to war, while everyone who would like think for one moment seriously could see that most of these narratives, well, I won't say that they are complete lies, but a lot of it is inaccurate and more propaganda than truth.
This is my main concern, this is why I think your theory is so absolutely important in order to understand what's happening to Europe at the moment, because the question we need to answer is how is
Exactly
it
right.
that so many very intelligent people, extremely intelligent people, and people who are in the same circles as we are, buy into the war narratives. Why is Europe marching toward a war with Russia? And it is absolutely clear, especially if you're looking what's happening in Germany, how the Europeans are gearing up. They're saying so. They're not even hiding for a war with Russia, which is it's a suicidal endeavor. And we've seen before. I mean, you were one of the main critics, of course, of the way that that COVID was approached with measures that were really like extremely harmful and so on. And I mean, the mass formation issue then tries, if I understand correctly, you're trying to understand how on the level of the group, how the level of the group interacts with the individual psychology of each person, right? And how certain things can start overriding even rational. So one more question here, like, is it also the availability of the media? The fact that for the first time in the 20th century we have mass media, right? We have TV and radio and this ability of large groups to hear the same narratives at the same time, and that apart from the atomization of society, that you have certain possibilities of talking to millions, potentially. Does that flow into it as well? And where do you think that the current state then is with the ability on social media of a whole new level of mass communication?
Yes. Let me first go for 1 minute into something you said in the beginning. Namely, that we could see how highly intelligent people just buy into the war narrative in Europe. Exactly. And the strangest thing is that, or one of the very remarkable things in the phenomenon of mass formation is that the higher the level of education, the more vulnerable people become for mass formation. So this is a very strange thing. You would think that highly educated people would be resilient, that they have this still critical thinking ability, which is not true. Like Gustave Le Bon in the 19th century already wrote in his book The Psychology of the Masses, of the crowd, he said like the higher the level of education, the more people will fall prey to mass. Something that was echoed by Jacques Ellul in his book Propaganda, the best book about propaganda that was written. He said exactly the same. He said the longer people go to school, the more easily they will fall prey for propaganda. So just, he said, like, Jacques Ellul said that this had to do with the fact that education and our school system actually is a kind of indoctrination. It's not that teachers know consciously that they are indoctrinating children, it's just the education system learns people not to think for themselves. It learns them to think all in the same way, which means it learns them to think according to the mainstream view of men in the world. And in this way, education becomes psychological preparation, which makes people vulnerable for the propaganda that will be used later on in life. So that's one thing. So the higher level of education, more easily they will trade with. And you can see it indeed in the example of the war in Ukraine. The war with Russia is an excellent example. I wrote 2 articles about it. I published them on my site. One article where I go into the structure of Putin's Russia, which exactly Putin is not a saint. We know that. We know he's not a saint. And there are many problems in Russia, also at the level of free speech. But if you look from the other perspective, like what NATO did, one thing for sure, NATO is also not the same, and they have this expansionist politics, in which actually goes so far that I think, in my humble opinion, that there is no other choice for Putin in Russia than to go to war, because if they don't, they will lose they won't be a superpower anymore. So it's so strange, like that an entire population really believes that Putin is
meet up at the fucking
devil which has to be destroyed, or which threatens to destroy Europe, without ever being able to take the other perspective and to see what happened in Ukraine, to see how American companies purchased like 30% of all the
fucking free baby
of the country, and so on and so on. It was so that's what mass formation does.
And no number of counter-arguments will ever help. You know, the first person I interviewed on my channel 4 years ago was Jack Matlock, the last year's ambassador to the Soviet Union. And he kept saying, like, this is our mistake, we should never have done that. And he's like just one long line of people who said, like, we must not push this war on the Russians. He was pushed to get a war. And he has been a war for 4 years. And even though all of these revelations came out, including the way in which the CIA had been infiltrating, you know, according to this the New York Times, not some conspiracy theorist magazine, the New York Times, how the CIA after 2014 had been infiltrating Ukraine and been starting to build up Ukraine as a bastion against the Russians and the forward capability, and how the UK and States the sabotage the Istanbul Agreement. All of this is out, confirmed from several sides. But yet, if you bring it up, the people who are under the grip of mass formation, they will get angry. But can you explain to me why it is that anger is the reaction that is then that the individual produces instead of a rational thinking?
Yes, I exactly. That's why it's so important that we understand what happens in a mass formation at the emotional level. You know, there's something very interesting, and I will just first take a helicopter to Montreal, like somewhere in the, let's say, 17th century or something. There was a huge, what I call, metaphysical revolution. Before the 17th century, the dominant human man in the world was the religious world. And then, like in the 17th century, that changed. The religious worldview was replaced by, slowly, step by step, by a rationalist, materialist worldview, which started to believe that the real world is the world you can see with your eyes and understand with your brain. And
nice. Okay.
From then on, well, I think that's what you have to understand. Like from then on, we started to believe that the human being, in the first place, is a rational being.
At least we know we can be very hard, no problem.
And also that we should be rational beings. Like that, when you wake up in the morning, the first thing you should wonder about is like, how will I be as smart as possible today? That's what the rationalist worldview believes. It's no longer, like when people before the 17th century woke up, they used to think, or at least that was what they were expected to do by the dominant worldview. Like, how can I live a good life today? So good and bad were the most important things. The first question you should ask was an ethical
damage.
An ethical question, not a rational question. And so, like, from the 17th century onwards, we started to believe that the human being should live its life.
257 damage crits. That sounds good.
Starting from the question, like, how can we be as smart as possible? How can we live a life that is as rational as possible? And it like.
Close. Not close at all, actually.
The major goal of life in this respect is to be the smartest and the strongest in the struggle to survive, something like that. And the strange thing was, like, if you look at modern democracy, how it started somewhere back in the 18th century, when after the American Revolution, you could say that the founding fathers, for instance, of American democracy, they all really believed that the human being is a rational being. They believed that people, when they were free, would think rationally and choose for politicians who were,
not retarded.
from a rational point of view, the best leaders. That was people like Thomas Jefferson and stuff. If you read their works, they all believe that. They believe, like, and even all the Enlightenment thinkers really believe that the human being is a rational being. Now, strange thing was, like, after a few decades, like I think by the beginning of the 19th century, 1810 or something, like 20 years later, after the American Revolution, or 30 years after the American Revolution, all the founding fathers of modern democracy, they knew already that they made a fatal mistake. That they knew already that the human being is not a rational being, not at all, and that was the beginning. Like almost at the same time, the phenomenon of modern propaganda emerged. Modern propaganda, which means a kind of practice. Like, propaganda is the most important organizing principle of modern democracy. If you read the work of the beginning of democracy, if you read all these people who witnessed the problems of early democracy, they all said we have no other option than manipulating the population. If you read, there is no other option. Without manipulation, it's impossible to organize society. And because by that time, after 20 or 30 years, they knew already that citizens and the people, that they absolutely wouldn't behave rationally. So modern propaganda is like the return of something that was repressed in the beginning of modern democracy.
Don't be a new.
Modern democracy started from the belief that the human being is a rational being.
Double storm.
And propaganda starts from exactly the opposite. It can make people believe the most irrational, no matter what. When you just confront them time and time again with irrational, emotional messages. So that's the point. You have these two things. On the one hand, you believe so typical for enlightenment that human beings are rational beings, and then, on the other hand, exactly the opposite. Like human beings are completely irrational, and with propaganda, which always goes to the emotions of people, which manipulates the emotions with propaganda, you can make them believe everything you want. So that's the point. Modern democracy actually is essentially exactly the opposite of what it pretends to be. It pretends to be a system where people are free and can choose rationally for what is good for them. But essentially, everyone who really studies modern democracy in an open-minded way will conclude that it is a system where people are fooled every day by propaganda, and where the population starts to believe the most absurd and irrational things because propaganda manipulation.
Or they can start believing the most absurd of things, right? It's not necessary that they do, but it is possible, which is why the question, how do democracies produce totalitarian states, is kind of the wrong question. It's more like, how is it that some democratic systems do not fall prey to totalitarianism and mass formation, whereas others do? What?
It's like you, the ammo.
What is it that is so? What is it that then informs this mass formation phenomenon, though? You know that sometimes you have this movement, and I don't recall if it was a metaphor that came to mind when I was listening to one of your podcasts or in somebody else. When how do you have this physical phenomenon that if you're on a bridge that is wobbly and a lot of people walk over that thing, then people naturally have to start walking in lockstep because they try to counteract the swinging of the bridge. And that itself can make the swinging of the bridge worse to the point where bridges collapse, that starts wobbling. And is mass formation, in a sense, that kind of phenomenon where each individual is kind of forced to react to the movements of the other one, and that then causes lockstep and in the end a totalitarian state?
Yes, sir.
Tommy.
Maybe it would be good to go into the mechanism of mass formation. Like in a few minutes, we can walk through it. Like I think, in my opinion, like I think like one of the major questions when you're studying the phenomenon of mass ecology or mass formation, one of the major questions always is like, why did it get stronger? Like, okay, there were always mass formations, like there was the Crusades, there was the witch hunts in the 17th century, and so on and so on. There was always mass formations, but the strange thing is like that this phenomenon became stronger and stronger and stronger throughout the last few centuries. And I believe that the reason why it became stronger in the first place was that the level of loneliness emerged. Like, I studied phenomenon of mass formation for a few years, and in my opinion, the starting point is always loneliness. Like so many scholars or have remarked that like something like propaganda cannot work in a population with good social bonds. Like you need disconnected, lonely people for propaganda to be very efficacious. So that what happened in the first place was this: like our rationalist, materialist view men in the world, for many reasons, I describe them in my book, disconnected people. It made them feel lonely, and it made more and more people feel lonely. And that's the first step. That's the first very important step at the psychological level. Loneliness. Hegel, the German philosopher Hegel, was the first who used the term atomization at the beginning of the 19th century already, to refer to the fact that in modern societies, more and more people started to feel lonely. And then, like, if you look like now in the 21st century, like, I think it's up to 40 to 60% of the people who report to feel lonely. Like Theresa May in Great Britain appointed the Minister of Loneliness just because she acknowledged how much lonely people they were. And like in the States, the US Surgeon General in 2017, I think, said that there was a loneliness epidemic. So many people feel lonely, disconnected. That's the first step. And then once people feel lonely, they will typically start to struggle with lack of meaning. Like an isolated human being. To an isolated human being, it always seems that life is without purpose, without meaning. Just because human beings have a spontaneous feeling of purpose and meaning in life when they feel that their existence has an effect on other human beings. So lonely people don't have that anymore, and they will typically be confronted with lack of meaning. Like this, unbelievable. Like almost 50% of the world population believes that his or her job is without purpose, that it is a so-called bullshit job.
Yo, on me, buddy. Over here.
Percentages are staggering, and then something extremely important happens at the emotional level. Once people feel lonely, disconnected, isolated, and struggle with lack of meaning, something very typical will happen at the emotional, at the affective level, and that's what, in my view, is just quintessential to understand nationalism. Like once people feel isolated, struggle with lack of meaning making, they will be confronted at the emotional level with what I call free-flowing frustration, aggression, and anxiety. That means a kind of frustration, aggression, and anxiety, which people cannot connect to an object. So meaning in plain words that they feel frustrated, aggressive, and anxious without knowing what they got aggressive. And that's an extremely
Oh shit, don't die, don't die, don't die, stay alive.
painful state. It's extreme. Like when you feel anxious, but you think that you know why you feel anxious, you feel a little bit in
Stay
control.
alive, bro.
If you feel anxious of a dog, you know you can run from the dog. But if you feel anxious without knowing what you
Run,
feel
find
anxious
somewhere
for,
safe, find a cheap spot to hide.
at psychological level, it's an extremely painful mental state. And when many people are in this state, which was definitely the case, for instance, before the corona crisis,
I need some hitters.
when many people in a population are in this state, when there are very high levels of free-floating anxiety, something very typical might happen.
These guys.
If
fucking
under
playing with
these
the balls.
conditions,
I mean, it says that they went in very
someone
hard, but
distributes a narrative
we shouldn't be going down like that. These guys don't know
through
what
the
they're
mass,
doing. They're just
through the
fucking
mass media,
sitting around playing with their balls and fucking.
indicating an object of anxiety,
The main mission.
for instance, a virus, and at the same time providing a strategy to deal with that object of anxiety, for instance, the lockdowns. Something very typical might happen. All that free-floating anxiety might at once connect to the object of anxiety, and people might be willing to buy into the strategy to deal with the object of anxiety, no matter how absurd it is, because the reason why they buy into the narrative is not because they believe that it's a rational, effective strategy to deal with the object of anxiety.
totally
No,
fucking glitched out.
it's just psychologically. It's because the strategy to deal with the object of anxiety functions as a kind of a ritual that allows them to have control over their anxiety. That's the first step. It's like a collective symptom. Something like that happens all the time at the individual level. Like when people have a phobia or one or another compulsive symptom, exactly the same process happens. But in a mass formation, it happens at the collective level. So all these people buy into the narrative because it makes them feel in control again. And then at the second step, something even much more important happens. Because so many people at the same time participate in the strategy to deal with the object of anxiety, it makes them feel connected again. They have the feeling that they fight a collective battle with the object of anxiety. It makes them feel connected again. It makes them the strategy, object of anxiety, the mask wearing, the lockdown, function as a collective ritual, which makes them feel united again, which makes them feel as if they can escape the most painful condition a human being can be in, complete isolation. It feels that they can escape their isolation and their loneliness, and that they can form a community again. I see, it feels as if, or it seems, because they are not really connected again. That's what makes mass formation so dramatic and so destructive. Because when people form a mass with a mass formation is a kind of group formation, which has a very specific characteristic. Like in a healthy group formation, individuals connect to each other, and the group is based on connection between individuals. But in a mass formation, something completely different happens. Like in a mass formation, a mass is a group that emerges not because individuals connect with each other, but because they all connect to the same collective ideal. Meaning, after a while, like all the energy, all the love between people is sucked away, and it's all injected in the bond between the individual and the collective. Meaning that after a while, people love the collective ideal, and it is usually incarnated in one or another leader, like Stalin or Hitler, for instance. People love the collective ideal much more than other individuals. And that explains, of course, why after a while in a mass formation, mothers start to report their children to the state when they see their children are not loyal enough to the state. So that's a mass. It's an extremely destructive, powerful mechanism. where people seem to escape loneliness, where they seem to find a way to take out their frustration and aggression on a scapegoat, where they seem to be in control of their anxiety, but where in reality they feel more and more anxious, frustrated and aggressive, and feel more and more lonely, and in this way become even more vulnerable to a new mass formation. So that was what happened when the Corona narrative ended. Immediately, almost day by day, after the Corona narrative lost its grip on society, Ukraine
Corona was not ended by any kind of lockdown mechanism. Corona was ended by Ukraine, because you could needlessly shift into the next one. You could even reuse the same kind of jargon. How do we break through that? And I buy into what you're saying, and I do think you got the analysis of how this works right. What do we do against it? How do we break the grip of mass formation? And on the realistic level and the unrealistic level. I mean, like unrealistically, just like ideally, I've had a talk with Dr. Neil McLaren, who wrote about narcissism and the connection to fascism, and he pitched the idea just on pattern, because the system is such that then these narcissists necessarily end up on the top. What we would need is a mechanism to prevent that. So let's say 50% of parliament should be elected, not elected by people, but purely random. Pure randomness, 50% goes to parliament, and then that would be a counter mechanism. That's of course unrealistic, but in the level of such things, and in the realm of realistic things that can be done, what are things that work against this mass formation in which we actually are, and in Europe we are walking toward a war with Russia if we do
yes, that's the most important question, of course. And like from my analysis, you can very easily say what the solution might be and what the solution won't be. And that, to understand that, I think you need to go one level deeper, and wonder like what the psychological reasons are for this loneliness that got stronger and stronger. There are 100 reasons why people in modernity during the Enlightenment culture got more and more lonely. There are 100 things, but there is one more very fundamental, which is the most important one, and which is always forgotten. I know nobody who focused on what I believe to be the most important, the most fundamental, the root cause of loneliness. The root cause of loneliness, I think, is the fact that in modernity and during the Enlightenment culture, people lost touch with truth. Very strange. Very strange. Like when the Enlightenment tradition started, when the rationalist and materialist view man in the world started, people started to believe that the entire universe is a kind of a machine, and that the human being is a small machine, a cog in the big machine of the universe, and that the human being is a purely biological being, and that the ultimate goal of life is biological survival, or enjoying as much as possible, or avoiding pain. Doesn't matter.
We could two-man it.
The ultimate goal of life has to be understood in materialist terms, according to this new materialist worldview. And from there on, something very strange.
Bro, I almost turned 3 on by myself. Come on, bro.
During the Enlightenment culture, humanity believed to have found the royal road, the highway to truth. Like, people started to believe that we can find truth just by observing the world with our eyes, and then determining the exact ratio between all the facts that are observed with our eyes. So that was how we believed to find truth in Enlightenment culture. And strangely enough, while we believed to be on the highway to truth, in a strange way we completely lost touch with it. And I believe because of the following reason. Even antique Greek culture knew already, all the old traditions knew it, that speaking the truth is always dangerous, because speaking the truth, by definition, means articulating words that destroy illusions. And everyone who tries to find its stability
There's a blueprint
in all
on the ground
kinds
there. I
of
don't know if you guys ever
common sense, socially shared illusions and in the world of appearances will get angry when someone speaks the truth. So, you know, everyone could feel that speaking the truth is always risky. And when you really look at life as a game in which the ultimate goal is to be the strongest, to survive, speaking the truth is extremely stupid, just because it puts you at risk. If you really look at the world from a materialist point of view, you have to manipulate other people. And definitely don't try to speak the truth, because truth speech is always dangerous. It's always risky. It makes you weaker in the world of appearances. You know, I can recommend everyone who's watching this podcast
We're gonna have to slap the person.
watch the 1978 speech of Alexander Solzhenitsyn at Harvard. Because that's exactly what he's saying there. I watched it for the first time like 1 week ago. That's exactly what he is saying there. He said like, you know, everyone expected Solzhenitsyn to be very critical of communism at Harvard. And of course he was very critical of communism, but at that speech he was in the first place very critical of Western society. He said Western society lost touch with truth because, he said, they start from a materialist worldview. He almost said literally what I mentioned in my book. And then I never heard a speech before, so I definitely didn't hear it when I wrote my book. But he sees along the same lines. He says like, Western culture is lost just because in Western philosophy and in Western materialism, there is no reason whatsoever to be found to speak the truth, because speaking the truth always makes you lose something. So anyway, speaking the truth, when in a society, a materialist society, people lose touch with truth and people find no reason anymore to speak sincerely, something very strange happens. Connection gets lost because speaking the truth
Yo, Ampy, I can do yours. Go to the other one.
is what makes people feel connected. Speaking the truth, you speak the truth when you articulate something that you usually hide behind our narcissistic ideal image.
Okay, one more
People
time.
constantly keep up an ideal image, a narcissistic image, and that's what isolates them
Okay, we got
from
it.
other people. And the act of sincere speech, of true speech, is what destroys these narcissistic ideal images and connects people again with each other. So a society in which there is less and less free speech is doomed to end in isolation and disconnected. Yeah, completely.
How?
One question here, because like the other very typical rationalist thing to assume is of course an truth and reality that actually metaphysically exist, and that they are part of
never
an
fixing the ammo
observer
up,
independent reality. And this idea of an observer independent reality to me is probably one of the most
Infinite
damaging
ammo
ones.
up,
I don't think it is. Even within physics, we've learned that the observer actually is crucial in order to determine the reality of the quantum world. And I view that as well, like as in also within the psychological framework of people, right? Truth is observer dependent. That's why, you know, the evilness of Vladimir Putin is an absolute truth within the framework of that this group of people. And the relational reality of the Russian political system, where things move each other and then react to things that were imposed externally, that is part of the truth of that you are not. But it is observer dependent. How do you and your framework account for that, or can it be discounted, the observer question?
Yes, well, the example of quantum mechanics is of course a very good example, and I'm writing 2 books at the moment.
infinite auto
and
turret.
one of them
Things
goes
10,
into the
5
history of
seconds.
science of the last 5 centuries, and of the way in which science actually constantly stumbled upon this strange phenomenon of consciousness, even the strange phenomenon of the soul, but constantly also walked away from it. Like
That's religious. We're gonna go away.
yes, exactly. Yes. The seminal scientists, the founding fathers of science, none of them was a materialist. and I even, like last year, I visited CERN for 1 week because one of the physicists there had read my book, Psychology of Totalitarianism, and he was very fond of it. And he said, like, look, maybe you would be happy to be here for a week and to see all these experiments observed. And so I went there. I even once wrote
Have infinite
an
shotgun.
article which is also about on the mathematical basis of Bell's theorem. So I'm into it, and I was always fascinated by what you mentioned, of course, that like even at the level of our material reality, there is an observer effect. Like there is no such thing as an observation which is not influenced or even constructed by the observing entity, by the human being that observes it. So that's true. But I'm not quite sure that I agree with you when you say that like there is no truth independent of the observer. I think you said that, but you know, yes, I believe that I would rather say like reality is always constructed by the observer, and you can see that very easily at the level of elementary particles. Like when before a particle, an elementary particle, is observed, it's a sea of potentialities. It's a wave, probability wave, they say in physics. Of course,
Feels good,
they don't know what they say there. Nobody knows really what a particle is before it is observed. Like from a physical perspective, okay, it's probably something like a probability
Theoretical
wave,
physics,
which is
quantum,
situated in a Hilbert space in mathematical terms. So, and at the moment of the observation, suddenly this probability wave
Comparing
collapses,
quantum
and a particle
right
appears
to
that is located
societal-
somewhere in space and time, and that has certain physical characteristics, which
That's a fucking-
or like a
that's a huge
very
connection.
small part
Societal,
of all these
psychology,
potentialities, all these
anthropology,
characteristics it
sociology.
possessed before the observation. So like the moment
Quantum
we observe,
physics,
we create reality. A reality
Schrodinger's
which is like
protest.
one minor aspect of a material reality,
The double
which is like one very small part of what
human rights.
everything that constitutes this reality was before the observation. So, but I think that we create reality. There is no reality independent of us as an observer. But in my opinion, that doesn't mean that there is no truth independent of the observer. Like,
In that case, truth must be shared reality. The realities of different individuals that accept the same reality, and that is then truth. Sorry, we're going into a very abstract.
Yes, exactly. No, for me, when we are talking about quantum mechanics, truth would be the probability wave, which we don't really know, which is so much more than we can observe, but it is out there to a certain extent. It is out there, and at the moment of observation, we reduce truth to this small thing we see with our eyes and understand with our brain. So that's more or less how I think at this moment about it. There is truth, but we can never fully articulate it.
Yeah, it lands us in the problem that truth is actually the cat being dead and alive at the same time. And that's a problem. Which Schrödinger hated that. That's why he did the experiment. But in that case, truth will be reduced to this kind of dissatisfactory state. It's got them both. which took us very far away from the original question: is can you think of things to do against mass formation? Because we really rarely use cloud of it in Europe, otherwise it's going to be millions of people who will die.
No, exactly. Yes, and of course, like the problem started when modernity got alienated from the act of sincere speech, meaning that as a human being, we constantly are confronted with a choice. Like, will we take the easy way and buy into all these narratives that everyone shares? Will we take it the easy way and buy into all the social illusions and shared narratives? Will we just, or will we take a difficult road and say like, look, okay, this doesn't feel good to me, and I will try to articulate why I feel this isn't right. So the act of sincere speech at all levels, from the lowest to the highest level, always boils down to this. It means that you decide to articulate words that go against certain ideal images that are projected onto us. Like most people even never realize that they buy into all these social norms and ideal images. They just constantly do. They never think for themselves. They always think as others want them to think. They speak the words that other people want them to speak, and they never speak their own words. That's what happens in a mass formation. Suddenly, the mass emerges. There's this huge pressure to conform, to go into it, and then there is like a few percentage of the people who decide to say that they do not agree. And Gustave Le Bon in the 19th century already mentioned, he said like every time a mass formation emerges, you have three groups. First, 20 to 30% of the people who buy into the mass. They just are completely hypnotized, literally hypnotized. It's hypnosis. It's hypnosis. Mass formation is mass hypnosis. And then you have a large 60%, 65% who knows that there is something wrong, but who chooses to remain silent because they feel the tremendous pressure of the mass. And then there is a few percent of people, sometimes up to 10%, sometimes even 20%, who doesn't go along with it and who decides to speak, to try to say like, look, there is something wrong with this narrative of the Ukraine war, holy shit, and Gustave Le Bon in the 19th century already observed, like he said, like this small group of dissident people, when they speak out, they will almost always be very disappointed because they will feel that the people in the masses refuse to wake up. Because like once someone is in a mass formation, is hypnotized, and no matter what you say, no matter how clear your arguments are against the narrative, they will have no psychological impact because they refer to a part of the reality to which no emotions are attached anymore. Meaning that at a psychological level, all these arguments have not the least no impact at all. So, and Gustave Le Bon said already, like, okay, so when these dissident people speak out, they were very disappointed because they see that the masses refuse to wake up. But, and that's crucial, he said like, but that doesn't mean that their words have no impact. When there are people who continue to speak out in a quiet and sincere way, not claiming that they know everything, but just saying like, look, I do not agree, there is something wrong according to me. When these people continue to speak out, they will not be able to wake up the masses, but usually they will prevent the masses from going to the last stage of the mass formation, where they typically will try to destroy everyone who doesn't go along with the masses. So, and that's what we need. When the masses do not go to the last stage, they will destroy themselves before they destroy everyone who doesn't go along with it. And to the contrary, when the people who do not fall prey to the mass invasion, choose to remain silent, the masses will first destroy the people who do not go along with the masses, and then they will destroy themselves, as happened in the Soviet Union, for instance. Didn't go give a lot of historical examples.
It's a very good point. So the act of resistance is actually also the act of helping the mass. It's actually of preventing that work. Just through resistance and through saying like no, there's something wrong here. Even if you don't go along with it, I want you to be registered. Okay.
Exactly. You know, the only cure. I analyze this from 20 perspectives, and you would see it's always the same conclusion. The only cure, the only remedy for a society sick of lies and manipulation, sick of propaganda, is sincerity. That's the only cure. We have to rediscover the psychological value of truth for a human being. Truth is fundamental for a human being. It's fundamental. It's fundamental for every human being, every individual, and it's fundamental for human living together. There can be no society truly humane which is alienated from the act of sincere speech.
I like that one, sincerity, the idea of sincerity, and that it registers, because it's very, I mean, yeah, once you then get the emotional reaction of the other one, that's when you know that you've touched something, right? That they would prefer not to be touched, and that's probably where to go. Matthias, people who want to read more about your analysis and your insights, there's of course your books, but is there, you said there's also Substack. Where else should people find you?
Yeah, where are we getting this?
But yes, there is my book, which is translated now, I think, in 25 languages. So it's also in Japanese, it's and in Chinese, and in most major languages. And there's my Substack page, where I publish short essays from time to time. Sometimes I don't publish anything for 2 or 3 months. Because I only write when I feel that there are certain things that want to be articulated. Otherwise, I don't write. Yeah. So my Substack page and my book is the two most important things, I think. I also publish from time to time something on the social media, but not too much, because I think on Substack you can publish like these longer essays, which I prefer. So that's probably the most important way to write.
Okay. I will link to both, to your book as well as to your Substack, in the description box below, and then I hope to talk to you soon again in order to continue this conversation, and also the idea, the ways of getting out of the mess we've maneuvered ourselves into. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you very much.
The economic fallout from 2 months of war.
The economic forums of shock and damage, so gotta push this again. Gonna do levers one more fucking time. Goddamn levers. that one more time. To reverse. Yeah. You gotta do the triple horse jump test, bro. It's hard to do when it's lagging out like this. So, you okay? You're right? Oh yeah, you're okay. Never mind. You got your horse. You got a different horse. Horse tech's so good. I told you. Guy doing? What the fuck is this guy's problem? What the fuck is this guy doing? What the hell is this guy's problem? What are we doing?
what you're doing.
extraordinaire. Just not even like counting us in here. Distract now. What about me? This guy's just what? This guy's just total shit. Alright. This equals 2,000 gold. 2 runs. Lollipopter times 9 blades. I'm not gonna say no to this. I mean, that's how you get ahead. That's how I got ahead in No Man's Sky. That's how I'm still ahead in No Man's Sky. That's how you get ahead in life. Somebody comes along and goes, let me bless you up. Let me dab you up with some cash. You're like, are you sure? And they go, yeah, I'm gonna dab you up. And then you're just rich. You're part of the rich crew. I don't know, it's just how it happens. I don't know how to explain it. I'm assuming that's how the rich people in the world. I just got all the money. I can't give it to you because if I gave you all the money, then I'd have no money. But someone will come along eventually and have enough money that they can give you some, and then you'll be part of the rich crew, and we can all live the yacht life together, virtually. It's not like I'm gonna tell the boys my last one. I gotta do a grocery run. I gotta do a RL mission, which is nice. What map is this? Far West. Oh, Far West. It's right beside us, isn't it? It's all right. Is that where it is? No, maybe not. Above them.
Hasta la vista.
It's like Honshu. What do you think down there, fellas? Again? I don't think it matters. I didn't even know what was going on that gotta make like a fetus and head out. God damn this game.